Nobody. Nobody reads short stories.
Hey everyone, I'm Jeremy.
And I'm Megan.
And you're watching Nobody Reads Short Stories.
So tonight is episode 7 of season 2, and the story is going to run about 30 minutes. So here is Jeremy Ray and Michelle Murphy reading Ellen Ireland's story, The Witch's Boy and the Weaver's Girl.
The Witch's Boy and the Weaver's Girl by Ellen Ireland. Once upon a time, not so long ago, and not so far from here, there was Golden Valley. Nestled within the valley was the village of Onarique. It was a special place, almost perfect, and people came from far and wide to live there. But there was one woman who was miserly with her crops. Even though she grew the biggest, juiciest, most fragrant, and flavorful fruits and vegetables in the whole valley, she shared nary one. It was rumored that because her crops were so perfect and so plentiful, she was a witch. And a witch she was. Her name was Malkaine. She used all of her powers to enhance the size and succulence of her crops. Then she used those crops to make potions and tinctures and ointments and balms, which she sold to other witches in the dark of night. Now, Malkaine was old, and she couldn't do all her farming and gardening and mixing and blending on her own. She had the help of a young lad, Samuel, who was 16 years of age. Samuel had lived with the witch since he was a small boy. That was when she stole him from his parents. Samuel was just 5 years old when his mother and father came upon Malkaine's cornfield. They didn't know the corn belonged to a witch or how stingy she was. Seeing it unattended and being very hungry, they plucked 3 ears of sweet corn. In return, they left 3 carved wooden goblets, for Samuel's father was a wood carver. The witch appeared in a dust storm and destroyed the 3 wooden goblets. She demanded that they give her something as precious as her corn in payment. Samuel's parents had no gold, but they offered their wagon and all its contents, everything they owned in the world. But Malkaine grabbed little Samuel's chubby hand and said,
"I'll take the boy. He'll work for me and tend and protect my crops from the likes of you."
Of course, Samuel's parents were grief-stricken and distraught, and they clung to the boy, refusing to let him go. Samuel's father drew a weapon, ready to fight hand-to-hand against Malkaine. Samuel's mother picked him up and ran as fast as she could. But the witch was a powerful spellcaster, and when she waved her arms, Samuel's father became a large oak tree with thick roots sunk deep into the ground. The hand that had brandished a weapon became a branch bearing acorns. Then she waved her arms again, and Samuel's mother became a willow tree, and her protective arms became long, trailing branches that touched the ground. Samuel tried to hide in the branches, but soon enough the witch found him, and she took him away. The people of Onarique had no knowledge of these horrible events. They didn't know that the witch beat and starved Samuel if he ever made a mistake in his duties. They only knew that he was Samuel, the witch's boy. When he came into town to do the witch's trading, they just walked past him with their eyes cast down. They were afraid of him. Week after week, he walked the lonely path from Malkaine's secluded house to the town. Day after day, he trod the abandoned trail to her fields to count and guard the crops. Each day, he wrote down the exact number of fruits on the trees and vegetables on the vines. He did her bidding without a complaint, but he was dreadfully unhappy. As each year passed, he still yearned for his parents and wished one day to be free. One day, when Samuel had not yet returned from town, a young girl from a neighboring village found herself on the empty road near the witch's fields. This was Avoca, and she was the daughter of the best weaver in her village. She knew how to spin the softest and warmest floss for weaving from the fleece of her flock of pure white goats. She had a special touch for dreaming out colors. She was able to create never-before-seen shades and hues by using special dyes that she had made from flowers and leaves, stems and barks, seeds and fruits. Avoca walked alongside a small cart filled with fluffy skeins of beautifully dyed fleece and her handmade loom. She was on her way to trade her wares in Onarique. Her favorite goat, Tristan, pulled the cart. All at once, both Avoca and Tristan lifted their noses to the air. A delicious fragrance floated to them from the nearby field. It was spicy and sweet, dense and delicate at the same time. Avoca led Tristan to the edge of the field to see what was growing there. The field turned out to be an orchard with rows and rows of short trees covered with deep green leaves. Peeking out from the sturdy leaves were the ruby red fruit of the plumpest and most dazzling colored pomegranates Avoca had ever seen. Their colors ranged from the deep red of a burning ember to the bright vermilion of the setting sun. The fragrance from the pomegranates and their star-shaped flowers was mouth-watering. The colors made Avoca's fingers twitch. She had to have some pomegranates to use in her dye work. She looked up and down the deserted road and for a moment was very tempted to steal a pomegranate or two and run away. But she'd been brought up better than that. At last, her gaze fell upon the contents of her wooden cart. Her face broke into a large smile.
Of course,
she cried.
I'll make a trade. The people of this village are well-known barterers. I'll just leave 2 of my best skeins in return for 2 of the pomegranates.
She plucked 2 skeins from the cart, then hiked up her skirts and stepped ever so carefully into the orchard. It took her a while to select the pomegranates with the best color. When she finally decided, she left 2 fluffy skeins of wool, one a deep purplish blue, the other a peachy pink at the base of one of the trees. It was some of her best work. She placed the pomegranates into her cart and led Tristan along the road towards the village. Soon they came to a fork in the road, and there was Samuel, resting under an old willow tree as he did every day, eating his meager lunch of a fig and a lump of cheese.
Is this the road to the village?
Asked Avoca. Samuel's mouth was full, but even if he could talk, he knew he'd have no words. Avoca was not only the prettiest girl he'd ever seen, she was the only person besides the witch who had ever spoken a word to him. He managed to nod, swallowing his food hastily.
I'm Avoca. This is Tristan. I've come to trade my skeins.
She offered, trying for some conversation. Samuel looked at the cart piled high with a rainbow of floss. He wiped his hands on the seat of his breeches and reached out to touch the wool. Then he stopped himself. I'm Samuel, may I? He asked.
Of course.
She replied, offering him a bundle of ruddy ochre-colored yarn.
Try this.
When he took the skein from her hands, their fingers brushed against each other. Their eyes met. It's the most beautiful stuff in the world. Samuel breathed, but he wasn't looking at the skeins when he said it.
I was thinking the most wonderful thoughts while I made it.
She replied, but she wasn't looking at the wool either. They gazed deeply into each other's eyes. Suddenly, Tristan bleated. Well, I'd better get back to work, said Samuel, turning to walk briskly toward the witch's field.
And I to the village.
Avoca clucked at Tristan to move him along. After their first meeting, Avoca made it a point to ask about Samuel in the village. She learned that he was the witch's boy. But instead of being frightened by that, she was intrigued. The next time Samuel came into town, he saw that Avoca had set up a stall with her beautiful skeins on display. She was weaving some wool that was the most unusual color of deep red, and a bright vermilion that shimmered yellow with the sun when the sun caught it right. She looked up from her work to see Samuel standing before her.
Hello, Samuel.
She smiled. Hello, Avoca, said Samuel, admiring the fleece in her loom. That is a wonderful color.
You like this? Well, meet me in 3 days under the willow at the fork in the road, and you shall have a surprise.
Samuel grinned at her. She grinned back. He walked through town doing Malkane's work with a spring in his step and a tune in his lips. He didn't notice that no one else spoke to him. He didn't notice that everyone was staring at Avoca. He was quite simply the happiest he'd ever been in his entire life. That evening, Samuel had to report the number of pomegranates that were growing on the trees in the orchard. The night before, it had been an accounting of ears of corn on the stalks, and the next night would be an accounting of beans on the vines.
Well,
Prodded Malkane.
how many pomegranates?
Samuel pulled a small leather-bound book of parchment from his pocket and turned to the pomegranate page. On it was written the number 534. He tore off the page and handed it to the witch. She turned to her bookshelf and pointed at an old, thick ledger. The book fluttered down to her work table and flapped its pages until it rested open on the one entitled Pomegranates. She compared the number on the paper that Samuel handed her with the last number written in the ledger. The last number written in the ledger was 536.
What?
Malkane bellowed so loud and furiously that the windows rattled in their casements.
2 pomegranates less? What has happened, boy?
Samuel faced her bravely. I don't know. The witch shrieked at him.
Tomorrow you must go into the village and find out who stole my pomegranates, or it will be the worse for you. Now get out of my sight.
That night, as Samuel lay in bed, he worried about how he would ever discover who stole the missing pomegranates. When he finally dropped off to sleep, he dreamed of a world that had a sky that was deep red and bright vermilion that shimmered with yellow. In 3 days' time, Samuel had not found the pomegranate thief. For 3 days in a row, Malkane had beaten and starved him. But although he was bruised and hungry, it was a joyful Samuel who waited for Avoca at the fork in the road. His heart leapt when he saw her approach, riding in the small cart pulled by Tristan. When she spied him waiting on the rock, Avoca's heart leapt as well. They had fallen in love. Avoca jumped from the cart and quickly hid something behind her back. Samuel stood and came toward her. He bent to give Tristan a scratch on his chin. The goat nibbled Samuel's sleeve. That's when Avoca looked into Samuel's eyes, and her happiness faded. A bruise was fading on his cheek, and his face looked drawn. He noticed her concern and smiled at her gently.
What's happened to you?
She asked softly. Oh, the witch is angry with me, but where's my surprise? He asked, changing the subject. Avoca still looked worried.
I'm sure this is the last thing you need, but here, I made it just for you.
She held out a beautifully woven scarf of the deep red hue he had admired in the village. It was the hue that he had dreamed about. He reached out and took the scarf, wrapping it snugly around his neck. It was so soft, it was as if a cloud had nestled against his skin. Avoca, this is the only thing I shall ever need. Avoca now smiled in delight.
Truly?
Samuel pretended to think a moment. That is, other than this, may I?
You may.
And very gently, he bent and kissed her, and she kissed him back. Holding her by the hands, he asked, How did you ever make such a color? Gazing joyfully into his eyes, she replied,
Pomegranates.
Samuel dropped Avoca's hands, stunned. She gasped, frightened.
Whatever is wrong, my Samuel?
Where did you get the pomegranates, my Avoca?
From the untended orchard along the road. I left 2 of my best skeins of wool in trade. Why?
Samuel began to run towards the fields. He called back to her as he ran. Those were the witch's pomegranates. He turned the corner and was out of sight before Avoca knew what to do. But she thought quickly and jumped back into the cart and snapped the reins at Tristan. They trotted briskly after Samuel and found him among the pomegranate trees, on his hands and knees. They aren't here, he fumed.
What's not here?
She asked, very concerned. The skeins, they're gone. At that moment, a crow flew by with a strand of purplish blue yarn. Avoca gasped.
That crow. He has some floss from the skeins I left in trade.
Samuel sat down on the ground, full of despair. Avoca sat down next to him.
Is this why she's been beating you?
He nodded bravely.
Can't we just explain to the witch? I can give her all of my skeins.
He shook his head. I would never want her to know it was you. You must leave Honorique. Tears spilled onto Avoca's cheeks.
I can't do that, Samuel. Please don't ask me that.
You must. Malkaine is cruel. She'll do something terrible to you. She needs me, but she'd hurt you. He stood up and offered his hand to her. Avoca was trembling. You need to leave. Never come back. Avoca cried and clung to him, but Samuel was insistent. He led her to the little cart and helped her in. He kissed her gently. I'll always love you, Avoca. I'll treasure this forever, he said, touching the scarf. He tapped Tristan smartly and the goat pulled the cart away from the orchard. Avoca turned to look back. She was heartbroken. Samuel smiled at her bravely. Then he returned to the witch. I have something to confess, said Samuel, his voice like stone. Malkaine was busy coaxing a family of newts into a jar. She cast a spell on the newts, which rendered them motionless, then looked up at Samuel with a mixture of spite and curiosity. He'd never voluntarily spoken to her before.
Really? And what, pray tell, is that?
I took the pomegranates. I was hungry. The witch shook with fury, and the little house shook along with her, as if every stick of furniture, every cauldron, broom, and bottle was just as furious as she was. She pointed a gnarled and bony finger at him.
Well, my fine young gentleman, I shall fix it so you'll never be hungry again. And I shall make it easy for you to never lose count of my crops again.
A cloud of dust and hay appeared like a tornado inside the witch's house. It swirled around Samuel until he disappeared. Then it burst out the door and spun towards the fields. The witch crackled with malicious glee and scuttled behind the tornado, watching with evil pride as it swirled into a ditch that separated the pomegranate orchard from the cornfield. All of a sudden, the tornado poofed out of existence, leaving only a few dust motes and hay straws to float down to the ground. And where the tornado had stopped, hanging from a thick wooden post, was a tall scarecrow. A scarecrow that was wearing a soft fleece scarf woven in colors of deep red vermilion and a shimmering yellow. Avoca was sobbing as she packed up her stall, her skeins and her dyes. She looked at the crimson, orange, and shimmering yellow yarn that remained on her loom and touched it softly. Then, with a determined look in her eyes, she turned to Tristan.
I can't leave him to face Malkaine for something I did. I'm going back to tell her the truth.
Tristan bleated and butted her, but she remained firm. With all her possessions loaded into the little cart, she left the village and walked the path to the witch's house. When Avoca passed the pomegranate trees, her eyes fell on the new scarecrow propped in between the fields. At first, she felt relieved.
See there, Tristan? All she did was have him make a scarecrow.
Then the wind picked up, and it fluttered her skirts and her hair. It also fluttered the scarecrow's scarf. Avoca saw the colors and knew the truth. She jumped from the cart and ran deep into the fields, calling his name over and over.
Samuel! Samuel! Samuel!
When she reached the scarecrow, she saw that it was indeed a burlap and calico version of her beloved Samuel, wearing the scarf she'd made. The scarecrow was perched up high on a wooden pole. It was so high that she could only touch his worn leather shoes.
This is all because of me,
she whispered, looking up into his face. The scarecrow that was Samuel shook his head, but he couldn't talk because his mouth was sewn shut with cross-stitch. He reached for her, but he could not remove his arm from the wooden pole. Avoca turned and gazed down the path. With a last look over her shoulder at Samuel, she marched out of the trees and headed toward the witch's house. Tristan followed her bravely, but Avoca stopped and kneeled in front of him. She held his bearded face in her hands.
No, Tristan. You must return home to the farm of my father. I must try to save Samuel, but I don't want any harm to come to you.
Tristan bleated and tossed his horns, but Avoca unbuckled him from the cart and pushed him in the direction away from Onarique. After a moment, he trotted obediently away. Avoca watched until he was just a white speck at the horizon, and then he was gone. She then walked bravely toward Malkane's house. The door and the windows of the witch's house looked like two eyes and a mouth shut tight, and it took all of Avoca's courage to knock on the door.
What have you done to Samuel?
She called, her voice quivering just a little, but there was no answer. She grew braver.
I'm here for Samuel!
Avoca called again and again. At last, the door and the windows flew open, and the witch appeared in the doorway, eyes blazing.
Who calls for that wretched boy?
It is I, Avoca, the weaver's girl. What have you done to my Samuel?
The witch rubbed her hands together, enjoying Avoca's foolish bravery. She stepped out of the house and circled around the girl as she spoke.
Your Samuel? What makes him your Samuel, my fine beauty?
He is my beloved, and I am his.
Malkane laughed so hard at this that she rose off of the ground and perched arrogantly on the roof of her house.
Is that so? I wonder why he never mentioned you.
He protected me.
And whatever would you need protection from, child?
From you, because it was I who took your pomegranates.
The witch's eyes blazed with fury and wickedness.
So your beloved lied for you, is that it? Well, that must have been some very special love.
Avoca trembled, but her words were strong.
It was, and I love him still.
How can you love him? He is a living scarecrow and will remain so forever, guarding my crops against thieves like you.
I don't care that he's a scarecrow. I will stay here and call his name day and night until you return him to me,
cried Avoca.
Samuel! Samuel! Samuel!
The witch clapped her hands over her ears.
Quit your crying, you foolish thing. I'll fix you so even as a scarecrow, he'll despise you.
Our love will survive against any black magic you can conjure,
shouted Avoca. Malkane giggled darkly.
If that ever happened, it would mean my magic is dead. And if my magic is dead, I would be dead. And as you can see, I'm very much alive.
With that, the witch waved her hands and pointed her bony finger at Avoca. A swirl of black dirt rose up from the ground and shrouded Avoca until she could no longer be seen. The girl called out,
Samuel! Samuel! Samuel!
until her voice grew hoarse. When the swirl of black dirt fell to the ground, there was nothing left of the lovely Avoca. There was only a black crow. The crow opened its beak and cawed. The witch laughed heartily and taunted Avoca.
Now see how your love will last, with you as a crow and your Samuel a scarecrow.
Avoca, now a crow, took wing and flew to the fields with the witch's laughter echoing after her. Avoca landed on Samuel's arm and began to pluck at the cross-stitch that held his mouth closed. Although Sam was grateful for this kindness, he didn't know that the crow was Avoca. It began to rain and Avoca flew to a nearby oak, her heart heavy. As she watched her beloved standing guard in the field, she wondered how she would ever get Samuel to know her again. It was several days before the rain subsided. Avoca never budged from her vigil in the oak tree. When the sun returned, Avoca flew back to perch on Samuel's shoulder. He was drenched and could barely move. She gazed deeply into his eyes, hoping he would recognize her. "Thank you for helping me, Crow," he breathed, stretching his mouth wide. "You're very kind. You can stay in the fields as long as you want." She cawed, trying her best to make it sound like Samuel, but all that came out was... Avoca noticed that in the storm, the scarf that she had made for Samuel had fallen into the pomegranate patch. She fluttered down to retrieve it and shook it dry. She placed it gently around his neck, nibbling his painted cheek in a crow's kiss. "Again, I thank you. That is the only thing I shall ever need." Avoca tried to call his name, but it was useless. He couldn't understand her. Deeply saddened, she flew off to collect what she needed to build a nest in the shelter of the oak. Soon she came across her abandoned cart full of skeins of wool. She would use that for her nest. Every day Avoca visited Samuel. Every day, with the help of the other crows, she pulled at the threads that held him to the wooden post. She made friends with the animals that lived near the field. Woodpeckers loosened the nails that held Samuel on the pole. Squirrels with clever little hands pulled the nails out of the wood. After much work, Samuel was released from the wooden pole that imprisoned him. He fell roughly to the ground, but although he was unharmed, the scarf Avoca had weaved caught on a splinter of wood and ripped. Samuel held the scarf in his straw hands. If a scarecrow could weep, he would have done so. "Thank you, my friends, for freeing me. Now I must find Avoca and see if she can still love me." Avoca, the crow, flew and flapped and cawed, circling Samuel. But he shooed her away and stumbled toward the road. In desperation, Avoca took the torn scarf in her beak and flew away to the safety of her nest in the oak tree. Samuel ran after her. He stood at the base of the oak tree, angry. "Return that to me, crow!" Up in her nest, Avoca ignored Samuel's crows. She quickly pulled thread after thread from her beautiful nest and with her sharp beak and clever claws, repaired the rip in Samuel's scarf. Then she fluttered down and offered it to him. Samuel touched the scarf in amazement. "How do you know how to weave?" he asked in wonder. Avoca fluttered and landed on his shoulder. She uttered a soft caw. "Samuel!" And at last he understood. "Avoca?" She nuzzled her sleek black head against his burlap cheek. Samuel stroked her glossy feathers. "Even though I am a scarecrow and you are a crow, I love you and I always will." She cawed the only response she could. "Samuel!" Suddenly, the ground beneath Samuel's feet began to rumble. A great crackling roar split the air. The flock of crows took to the air, and the animals ran to their dens and burrows to hide. Samuel looked across the fields and orchard toward the sound. It was coming from the witch's house. Samuel ran toward Malkane's house and Avoca flew behind him, but they stopped when the house suddenly exploded into a huge funnel of dust, black dirt, and twigs. Within moments, there was nothing left of the witch, Malkane, or her house. The dust funnel moved with amazing speed over the road toward Samuel and Avoca. It enveloped them until they could no longer see each other. Avoca cawed and Samuel called her name. When the funnel moved on, Samuel and Avoca were once again their human selves. They embraced each other in happiness. Their love had lasted, despite the witch's spell, and that rendered Malkane's magic dead. And with her magic dead, Malkane herself was dead. The funnel of dust continued its path, this time surrounding the oak tree in which Avoca had made her nest. When the funnel spun away, the oak tree was gone. In its place was a man. It was Samuel's father, whom the witch had enchanted so long ago. Samuel, Avoca, and Samuel's father followed the dust funnel to the fork in the road. There stood the old willow tree where Samuel often rested. The funnel swirled around the tree, hiding it from view. When the funnel finally stopped spinning, Samuel's mother appeared. It was a joyful reunion for the family, but no joy could compare to that of Samuel, the witch's boy, and Avoca, the weaver's girl. They were now free to love and be together for the rest of their lives.
Yay! Congratulations, Michelle and Jeremy. That was a fantastic reading. Oh my goodness.
Michelle!
Well, there you go. High five, guys. Michelle, thank you so much for your lovely work. If any of you listening are interested in learning about Michelle, she was on the podcast earlier in season 1. You can find her at the Michelle Murphy on Instagram. Yes. So check her out and all of the wonderful things that she's up to. And you'll more than likely probably see Michelle further down the road.
You so sure Michelle, will. You're coming back, girl.
Love you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
She was such a good witch.
She was such a good witch and did such a wonderful reading of switching between the voices. I really like that.
Oh my goodness. While reading the script, I was like, is Michelle really doing both voices, or did she just kidnap someone and have one of them doing the voice?
Nailed it. The witch was just so good.
It was really good.
So before we start talking our heads off, I'm going to actually start cranky.
Like we already are.
We already are. So here we go. Crank and Cranky. So 3 minutes. Okay, he's on.
Megan, I had a burp so bad. I was like, oh my God, I cannot ruin Ellen's story by burping. And every moment I was like, no, not there either.
Very quickly, I noticed when I was reading long stories that I also needed to burp. And I'm like, is this just something that comes out of reading for a long period of time? Is just all that gas is coming out? I don't know.
I think it's also one of those things you're like, what's the worst thing you could do right now?
Right. Burp or cough. I think burping is a little more rude than coughing, but I don't know. Anyway, let's talk about Ellen's story.
I love this story. All of our stuff has been so dark, and I like dark too, but it's so refreshing to have something nice, and especially now, right in this very moment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm so glad that we were able to do a fairy tale, especially this time of year where you kind of going into the fall and people are thinking about the things that, they hold dear. And I think this was the perfect story for this time, and particularly this week.
Have you noticed too? One of the things I really love about this piece is how Ellen plays with colors. So it's it's very fall, even the fall colors and stuff.
Yeah, I was really thinking about that a lot through this reading, just about not just the colors. At first I was like, oh, the pomegranate.
It's very tactile too.
Tactile, yeah.
Yeah.
But also the way the natural world kind of comes alive in this story, because you have have the crows helping, and you have the corn, and you have I feel like the natural world is very alive, and kind of when I think about the surrounding world of this story, I think a lot about what is happening in nature, the ground and the corn and things like that.
When we have Ellen's waiting in the green room, by the way, everyone, but you know that. But when we have her on, I'd love to ask her if that was her intention, to have wildlife around. So we should ask that as a question. Yeah.
And another thing that struck me this time was I was thinking about the witch turning the parents into trees. And I was like, I wonder if she intended to turn them into trees, because I feel like being turned into a tree is almost a safeguard for you. Because a witch wants to destroy you, or a witch wants to infiltrate you and turn you into something bad, a bad magic. And so I was like, but his parents were turned into trees, and I always think of trees as safety.
And they are, because think about their roots, how deep their roots go, So
right.
they're there's something that cannot be blown by the witches. We got Megan again. Always scaring the crap out of Megan. Never fails. Even if it's right in front of her. It's my favorite part. I'm a wicked person. I'm as wicked as the witch.
You not quite so wicked. not quite so wicked. All right, so let's bring Ellen on.
Hello.
Hi, Ellen.
Hi.
So before we get into our wonderful conversation, I just want to tell everybody about all the cool things that you're up to and that you've done in your career. So storytelling has always been a part of Ellen's life, and she followed that love to the Walt Disney Company, where she became a creative executive, rising all the way from intern to senior vice president. It's a long way and a hard way to travel, I'm sure. And eventually heading the creative affairs department at Disney Toon Studios. Her screenplay, Sunrise in Memphis, was developed with CBS Films and Carol Burnett. And her supernatural teen drama series, Middlebrook, was developed for ABC Family with Dan Lin Productions and Warner Horizon Television. I mean, and I'm going to go on a little bit more. If you're not already impressed, her work has placed in multiple competitions, including the Nichols Screenplay Competition, Austin Film Festivals, Atlanta Film Festival, 13horror.com, and many, many more. Like, I don't want to take up this whole interview going on about how awesome Ellen is. But when she's not killing it as a screenwriter and just a writer in general, she teaches story development at Emerson College. So welcome, Ellen. We're so excited to have you here. And thank you for letting us share your story.
Thank you so, so much. It was pure delight to sit and listen to my words come off the page, and just the fact that somebody said yes to a fairy tale is kind of a fairy tale. So, you know.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, we were so happy to be able to have it here. Can you tell us a little bit about like what inspired you to write a fairy tale?
Well, I've always lived mostly in my imagination. They got not punished, but certainly derided for that growing up.
Listen, we feel you. Hello. We're gonna form a club.
Company.
Yeah.
Good company. Yeah.
Imagination for grown-ups. So
Yes!
that's always, kind of been part of my life. In fact, I've boosted my laptop up by a book that is The Spells of Enchantment by Jack Sipes. So anyway, that's just sort of in my DNA. But this story in particular was really kind of inspired by my love of crows. I kind of just love crows. Can't even describe to you why, but they're smart. They're so smart, and they have such a great society with each other.
Ellen, can we hug? Can we hug right now?
Yes.
So listen.
So Ellen and Jeremy are like holding hands right now for our listeners.
Holding her hand right now. Oh my God, same. Crows are the most amazing thing. My German grandfather, we're gonna go back to talking about you, but my German grandfather, he had crows that he had trained that like when he did a certain whistle, they would come and he could feed them cat food.
Yep. There is a Facebook group, probably there's more than one, on about, people who love crows, people who, feed them probably when they shouldn't because their neighbors don't like it so much. But yeah.
I love that you show crows in the positive light, by the way, like, because they would usually be associated with like the negative thing of the witch, like the black cat and the crow. So I like that they're actually the helper in this piece.
Yeah. So I love them. I try to put a crow in everything I write. Either they have a big role or a small role, just cameo, but they're in there someplace. I collect their feathers. I know this is maybe much more than you want to know. Anyway, I think about them a lot. And so I started thinking about, well, what do crows love? Okay, they love other crows, but the storyteller in me kind of wondered, well, what if a crow loved the wrong thing? Like, what if they didn't fit in with the rest of the crows? And, it kind of spun from there, what's the crow's arch enemy? Well, it's probably not a scarecrow. It's more likely a hawk or something like that. But anyway,
Are you a pantser? I have a feeling you're a pantser, right?
I don't know what that is.
So
I'm not.
So there's like two different types of writers. There's the outliner who does the outline, and then there's the person that is like getting the story told to them while they're writing. And I have a feeling you're the second one, where you're like, oh, tell me the story.
Well, I'm the second one until I hit a certain point. and then I turn into the other one.
Oh, she's
You
got
know,
both.
She's a
So
hybrid.
She's a hybrid.
I'm a hybrid. So yeah, I let it go, kind of just seat of your pants, I guess that's where that comes from.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
at a certain point, I'm like, you know, the executive in me is like, oh, you must outline this, otherwise you will get lost along the way. So
I hope you do it with that like flourish too, like the
Yeah.
let's find the voice. I wish I was that nice to myself all the time.
Well, that's Jeremy and I have actually talked quite a bit about the process on the show, and we've talked to other writers just about like their relationship with the muse. I mean, do you feel like when you're just kind of letting it go, do you feel like things are kind of getting out of control and you want to, you know, rein it in, or are you comfortable with just kind of like exploring whatever you're feeling as you're writing that?
I am pretty comfortable letting it go where it wants to go. And I will, you know, I wish I was organized enough to, you know, some writers have like journals and stuff. Like I have a million started journals, but I just grab whatever I'm close to and write down my thoughts of the moment. And so I just sort of throw everything in a great big folder.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess I just kind of feel like, okay, I've sort of thought through enough, beginning, middle, end. And then I start to kind of look at all my little pieces of paper. And then I start to kind of construct the structure of it. And I kind of like that system because it gives me a tangible thing.
It's like a quilt, right? Like it's a story quilt.
Yeah, you could say that. It gives me something tangible, like, you know, if I write down Crow loves Scarecrow and I throw it in a folder, then I'm going to pull that out and I have this tangible thing that I know that I thought was good at one point, and where can it now fit, you know, with all my other little puzzle pieces. So
I love that.
I love
the
that.
idea
That's
of you
great.
having this like inspiration bucket that you
I
can kind of
love
reach
that.
into and pull out ideas, and that's really cool.
That's cool.
And thank you for sharing that about your
Sure,
process.
sure.
What was the hardest part of the story to write? Like, did you have any challenges?
Well, here was the challenge. Because I'm primarily a screenwriter, it was hard to let this be a short story. I kept wanting to be, oh, is this an animated something or other? Or, you know, and finally I just had to say, no,
You're going to be a short story. You stay where you're supposed to be. Stay where you're supposed to be, story.
Yeah. So I had to kind of just like release all of that. Oh, you know, what is anybody going to do with this kind of thing? And just let it get written. But I'm really glad I did, because when you guys were talking earlier about, you know, dipping into the colors and how things feel, you can do a little of that in screenwriting, but not much, right? Because that doesn't translate to the screen. You know, it's not dramatizable. I mean, it is, but it's a whole different process. And so in the writing of a short story, you can talk about how things feel and taste and smell and all of that. So it was really fun.
What related to what you were saying, I've had a conversation with Megan before about how with a screenplay, you have to give the story over to someone else, and then they're the director, and then there's the performers, costume designers. But what you're saying is you got to be everything. You got to be the actors, you got to be the director, you got to design the world. So it's all yours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes this piece kind of precious to me, because so often we do end up sending our babes out into the wilderness and hope that they
get loved.
But yeah, so this one I did have control. Oh, that was good. It's nice to have control.
Have you written other short stories, or do you think you'll write short stories in the future?
I think that I will. I've been thinking actually about a novel based on one of the screenplays that I wrote. So, but
Are you able to talk about that? Like I don't want to pressure you, but I kind of want to know.
well, it's a series called FKA Fairy, formerly known as Fairy, and it takes place in our real world, but also not an imaginary world because it actually exists, but a magical world that exists parallel to our own. And it focuses on a fairy who wants to get out of that magical world and find true love. Not fairy dust love, but the real thing in the real world. So she makes that
cool.
transition, and of course with unintended consequences, and one world bleeds into the other, and people fall in love with the wrong people, and so that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Oh, that sounds great. Please write it because I want to read that story. Sounds amazing. I just really like the idea of, I think when we're sold love and we're taught about what love is, so much of it is
we were just
sold
talking about this, Megan.
Right. Jeremy and I were just talking about this off the show. Like, we're sold this fantasy world, right? So I kind of like the idea of someone going from the fantasy world into the real world and doing it in reverse and kind of figuring out how that would work. So
that's really smart.
Yeah, so that's your homework. Get on that.
You didn't think you were going to be getting homework, right?
Well, I'm just, it's part of the homework that I give myself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but it's nice to have a vote in that little, okay, somebody likes the fairy thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, fairy tales, like people, even stuff that isn't fairy tale stories, like it's just everything happens really easily and like magically. So it would be interesting to have someone be like, I want to see how it is in the real world, I think that's an interesting take.
Yeah, she does have to give up some of her powers, of course. So yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well.
The flip side of it.
Yeah. Well, we'll definitely keep our eyes peeled for that one. So you'll keep us. So anything, you just let us know when that's coming out, and we will definitely plug you on the show.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So Maureen says, one of her comments from one of our listeners was from Maureen, and she said, love a good fairy tale, very unique. And Michelle's role in reading was great. Yeah. Oh, and she says I was too. I didn't plan that. I just read that on the spot. I wasn't trying to.
Yeah, right, Jeremy. We know you want the accolades too.
Confession. Maureen didn't even write that. It was me. I just set myself up for a compliment. But no, seriously,
Maureen.
Thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you for being such a wonderful
Absolutely.
If you ever have another short story, send it our way.
I absolutely will. I absolutely will.
Yes, please do, and stay safe out in your desert world, and enjoy the fall, and hopefully we'll be seeing you soon.
Thank you so much, you guys.
Thank you, Ellen.
Well, and have a great.
Thank you, Ellen.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Lovely, just lovely.
So lovely. Oh my goodness.
We've gotten really lucky with our people. Like, I'm really happy with our people. They're just lovely people. How many times can I say that word?
I don't know. Why don't you say it? Why don't you just keep saying lovely, lovely, lovely over and over again?
Oh, I was going on people.
Oh, okay.
So this is the part where we have to plug ourselves.
Oh my gosh. So, if you haven't liked or subscribed to us on YouTube, you just need to get on that right now. We are so honored and humbled by everybody who subscribed. We started out season 2 with 67 subscribers. We now have 87 on YouTube, and we're just so excited that people are loving the show and they're showing their support. And as you know, our goal for season 2 is 100. So if you haven't already subscribed, we're so close. So if you haven't already subscribed to YouTube, please do so. Just like and subscribe. You can get notifications if you ring the little bell on the side. If you're not into YouTube, that's cool, because you can find us on Stitcher and iTunes, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify, and now on Amazon Music. And you can download any of our podcasts, any of these episodes, and take it with you wherever you go. So if you're cooking this week, or you're cleaning this week, or you need a break from whomever you're spending this week with, like, please don't hesitate to listen to one of our lovely stories.
Megan, I got an idea.
Okay.
Since we gave our author a homework assignment, let's give our listeners a homework assignment too.
Oh, okay. So listeners, my homework assignment for you is for you to go to your favorite podcast platform. That's Spotify. And if you're not familiar with podcasts, it's really easy. You just download the app onto your smartphone or your device. And then you just type in Nobody Reads Short Stories and we'll pop up, and then you subscribe, and then you can easily download it and take it wherever you go. So go to Spotify, go to Stitcher, go to Amazon Music, and download just one story, and listen to it and let us know what you think.
All right, mine's a little more sneaky. Are you ready? Megan, are you nervous?
I'm nervous. Now I'm even more nervous.
The witch has rubbed off on me. No, so this is what you're gonna do, listener. You're gonna have a conversation with somebody and be like, have you listened to an audiobook lately? And if they say, I love audiobooks, you'll be like, I know something that you might like for free. Don't do it that way. But like, seriously, like anytime like somebody does mention like an audiobook or something, just be like, hey, I know something that you can listen to for free. And that's my homework assignment. Ooh,
Yeah,
we're talking a long time, Megan.
We are. We're talking a long time. We don't have Cranky here to keep us in track. So
oh no,
this is gonna get out of hand.
Oh
quick,
no. Speaking of talking a lot, we're also on social media, surprise. So we're on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram.
Yes, and you can find us also at nobodyreadshortstories.com, and that is where you can find the magical link to our merchandise, which I know some of you are really jonesing for because it's holiday season and you have to buy presents. And
look what I just apparated.
Jeremy's holding up the magical NRSS podcasts pillow that is magical.
Yeah, exactly. You can throw it in ponds and it will give you wishes.
Like a penny?
Yeah.
Oh.
And it floats, I think, so you can get it back.
It might float for a little while until it's sucked up with water.
Oh my goodness, we're gonna get in trouble. There are gonna be pillows floating everywhere.
Oh my gosh, I feel like Mark is gonna like tell us that we have to stop talking sometime soon. Okay, so let's focus.
Focus. So Megan has a website, meganamorrison.com. Like anytime she has like news on her writing, you will be informed.
Yes. And Jeremy has a website, jeremyraystories.com. You can also find him on Instagram at jeremyraystories. And if you go to his website and you sign up for his stories, you will get a micro story in your email box every Tuesday. And they're quick little stories and they're lovely. And speaking of short and taking it with you, like there's nothing better than this.
And what's the next episode, Megan?
I don't know. It's a mystery to me.
It's our mystery episode. One hint, because we really don't know what it is yet either. It is a mystery to us too. But one hint is that the person will be dead.
Yeah.
It will be a dead author.
And I'm not ruling out that it won't be Marie Corelli. So you guys better watch out.
Don't you threaten our audience members. They did not like our last Marie Corelli story.
I'm just joking. I can definitely tell you it will not be a Marie Corelli.
They are going to take our follows back. They're going to be like...
No, they're not. No, they're not. Our listeners love us. They're not going to take our stories back.
Well, seriously, thank you all for listening.
Thank you all. We'll see you next week. Good night.
Bye.
No one reads short stories anymore. I really don't know what they're written for. Go write a short story and throw it out the door. 'Cause no one reads short stories, funny, sad, or gory.